My next guest has been a driving force behind President Trump's immigration policies. He is White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, Stephen Miller. Stephen, great to see you. You know, the interesting thing about hearing from a guy like Gene Simmons right there and what he had to say, when you do talk to someone who is either the child or the direct legal immigrant to the United States, they often share that type of love of America. Wherein, when we look at an illegal population, you don't often hear that same type of patriotism.
Well, first of all, thank you for having this conversation, Will. I think there's been an incredible lack of honest, truthful, candid conversation in American media for a very long time about immigration policy. And you're right, of course, that immigrants who come here illegally engage in an act of spite against America from the moment they cross that border, and they continue to break our laws and flout our system and defy our rules every single day they're here, and continue to plunder and pillage off the system. And of course, their children, as a result of so-called birthright citizenship, which is the greatest scam in history, get unlimited welfare for life that goes to the benefit of the legal alien parents. But I want to address your monologue specifically about the 1965 Immigration Act and what that means in American history. So during the Civil Rights era, and this is the simplest way I can put it, there was a thought in effect. You can go back and you can read the transcripts of the debate at the time of applying civil rights to immigration policy for the globe and to create a civil right for people from every part of the world to come to America in ever-growing numbers. And so a system that for years, as you mentioned, had been tightly restricted, suddenly established this global ability of people in every part of the world to come to America, to bring their families to America, and then eventually empty out their entire towns and their entire villages to the United States of America. And so what you saw between 1965 and today was the single largest experiment on a society, on a civilization that had ever been conducted in human history. Not just the 76 million immigrants that were brought in, largely from the third world, but their descendants too. So you see with a lot of these immigrant groups, not only is the first generation unsuccessful, again, Somalia is a clear example here, not only is the first generation unsuccessful, but you see persistent issues in every subsequent generation. So you see consistent high rates of welfare use, consistent high rates of criminal activity, consistent failures to assimilate. But this shouldn't be a surprise, Will. It's just common sense. If Somalians cannot make Somalia successful, why would we think that the track record would be any different in the United States? Go third world country by third world country. No one's saying, look, there are people all over the world that are great people. But you look at the society. If Libya keeps failing, if the Central African Republic keeps failing, if Somalia keeps failing, right? If these societies all over the world continue to fail, you have to ask yourself, if you bring those societies into our country and then give them unlimited free welfare, what do we think is going to happen? You're going to replicate the conditions that they left over and over and over again. And we mask the impact of immigration in every public policy issue we discuss. We talk about test scores. Well, if you subtract immigration out of test scores, all of a sudden our test scores skyrocket. If you subtract immigration out of health care, all of a sudden we don't have nearly the size of the health care challenges our country faces. If you subtract immigration out of public safety, all of a sudden we don't have violent crime in so many of our cities. Issue after issue, we talk about these things as they just happen to us. The schools just suddenly fail. Violent crime just suddenly explodes. The deficit just suddenly skyrockets. These are a result of social policy choices that we made through immigration.
And Stephen, I think the word choice that you just used sticks out to me. You said, when we import these societies, it's not the importation of individuals, but individuals in such a number that there's never a requirement and often even not a desire to assimilate, then what you have done is import the previous society. Are there Somalis that can assimilate into the United States and be successful in this new world? Absolutely. But when it's done at such numbers that it's never a requirement and maybe not even a desire, then you can live in unassimilated communities in the United States. You never have a cohesive common bond with the existing nation, and you can live the way that you did in Somalia or in Central America.
And even worse than that, you end up with what our founding fathers feared the most, which is that you have foreign immigrants who become advocates, not for this country, but the country that they left. So you see,
Right.
replete throughout Somali politics in Minnesota is this constant concern about how to reorient U.S. politics around Somalia, and then using welfare fraud, pillaging the U.S. financial system to prop up a foreign country. So in this case, the U.S. becomes an object not of patriotism, but of plunder. And when you're talking about assimilation, two things matter enormously: the numbers and how different the cultures are. So the further away in culture you go and the larger in number you go, by definition, the greater challenge it poses to assimilation.
Yes. And so one last question, Stephen. I think you and I could have and should have this conversation at a much longer scale. This is something that is incredibly important and worthy of a half hour together. But such is the nature of television as it is right now. I'm working on that. But this will be quickly my last question for you. What can we do, Stephen? You know, this was something America addressed in the 1920s. They had these debates.
Yes.
They had these conversations openly. And they chose in the 1920s to say, we are going to put strict quotas on people coming from different parts of the world. 65 did away with what we did in the 20s. So do we need something like the 1924 Act?
Clearly, we need to have in this country exactly what President Trump called for, which is that we need a moratorium on immigration from third world countries until we can heal ourselves as a nation, solve our education issues, solve our healthcare issues, our public safety issues, our assimilation issues, our cultural issues. So the 1924 Act is such a good example because we had large-scale immigration from Europe from 1880 to 1920. So in other words, we went from a country that had immigration from part of Europe to immigration from many other parts of Europe. But even other European countries pose enormous stresses on the U.S. system, both economically and in terms of security. There's a lot of crime, a lot of threats to public safety and order, and those were addressed with very strict new immigration quotas. What they don't teach you in school is that from 1920 to 1970, there was negative migration. There was a half century of negative migration. The foreign-born population declined by 40% for half a century. During that same time period, Will, the U.S. population doubled from natural childbirth. That was the cauldron in which a unified shared national identity was formed. They went through a depression together. They went through world wars together. They landed on the moon together. This great period in American history happened at a time when there was negative migration. They don't teach that to our kids in school, and frankly, I would submit very few politicians serving in Congress probably know that, Will.
Oh, man. Let's work on that half-hour conversation on television, not just on podcast and digital. Thank you so much, Stephen Miller.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain podcast for full episodes right now.